After more than 5 years beyond the terrorist attacks of 9/11, numerous actions have been taken to address issues about national security and safety. America's seaports have been identified as significant potential targets. High on the list is the San Pedro Bay in Southern California. A large population base in the surrounding area where approximately 40% of the nation's imports arrive provides a compelling reason for concern. The local ports, in effect, serve as America's front door for goods entering the country. Several academic think tank reports have been written analyzing possible terrorist threats to the Los Angeles Long Beach harbor. Those potential threats range from destruction of key bridges to nuclear blasts to radioactive dirty bombs exploding in containers. Anticipating a devastating occurrence from any of these scenarios, federal, state, and local authorities have adopted strategies and procedures to thwart a terrorist attack in the harbor. Additionally, the global logistics industry has taken a lead role in securing freight. Industry experimentation is underway in the utilization of radio frequency identification devices attached to containers for tracking purposes. Shipping companies recognize that tracking, evaluating, and inspecting suspicious cargoes at the points of origin before loading those goods on ships is a key component to defeating terrorism.
I believe that the opposition would like to interrupt our opportunities to consume and our way of life in general. We've got a very well-developed economy. There are a lot of goods and services flowing through that economy. We're rather adversely affected if that flow is disrupted. I think a logical opponent, for whatever reason, might look to that avenue as a mechanism for harming us. And because many of these facilities are concentrated, ports in particular, they're likely to be attractive targets.
Various suggestions have been proposed to continuously improve LA Long Beach harbor security. Among the proposed solutions are better intelligence about suspected terrorists and their connections to goods movement, better coordination among security-related agencies at all levels of government, extensive disclosure for all cargo and related manifests, uniform procedures in how goods are packed and moved, and technological advances in tracking and inspecting containers. These procedures would have to be adopted internationally to be effective at the local level. Developments in several of these areas indicate significant progress already has occurred. Soon after 9/11, a movement began to provide better security in trade logistics. In late November 2001, the U.S. Customs Commissioner announced the implementation of the Customs Trade Partnership Against Terrorism, or CTPAT. The partnership involves worldwide customs agencies working with over 6,000 international shipping companies to improve standards for goods movement. Companies that comply with CTPAT standards receive expedited customs processing.
Well, I think the guiding philosophy is the government is partnering with the trade community or the private sector to better secure the supply chain. And I think that's basically the guiding philosophy. We've worked in partnership to develop the CTPAT program. We've developed the security criteria that companies must meet to remain into the program or to be into the program. So I think that's been it's definitely the largest private sector government program that's come after 9/11.
It goes as far as the gating around your plant. You have video cameras, some full-time guards. Those are things that they look at to see if you can meet the criteria. How do you inspect the containers when they come into your plant to be loaded if you're exporting it? How do you inspect the containers that are coming in loaded into your plant before you unload them? Could there be some compromise somewhere along the way? Then you take it externally, then go out to outside of your own internal organization and look at your trucking organizations that you're dealing with. You're looking at your suppliers, you're looking at your carriers, the whole supply chain all the way along the line, and then you in turn have to see if your suppliers are meeting, if they're not CTPAT program, at least they're meeting the criteria.
In late 2002, federal legislation was signed by President Bush that created the Department of Homeland Security, combining 22 separate agencies with responsibility for monitoring borders, rails, airways, seaports, and customs. Another critical piece of federal security legislation in 2002 produced the Maritime Transportation Security Act. In order to comply with the act, ports and terminals across the country have invested hundreds of millions of dollars in perimeter security, access control, communications technology, and security training.
Many of the things that would be included would be perimeter fencing that was reliable, access control, identification of all visitors, maintaining the security systems equipment, and having communication capabilities for emergency response as well as to communicate with the Coast Guard and so forth.
San Pedro, where the Port of LA primarily is, we are a port town. We're not a port and a town. And as you see from being in the area, that everything is together. So we have to put a great deal of thought into the constituencies of the people that live adjacent to our facilities and make sure that in anything we do, they're a key consideration in how we move forward. Because we can't just, we have to ensure that the port is secure. But we also have to ensure that if something happens, we have the means and a plan to make sure that these people, that the community gets taken care of as well.
In early 2003, the 24-hour manifest rule came into effect. Customs and Border Protection now requires shippers to provide complete and thorough manifests 24 hours prior to ships leaving foreign ports of origin. A later development involved a mandatory 96-hour notification to the Coast Guard prior to ships arriving in ports of destination. Also before arriving, ships must provide additional information, including complete lists of crew members. The Coast Guard has assumed much more responsibility since 9/11 for stopping and boarding commercial container cargo ships in the effort to disrupt terrorism. If manifests and information about crews, cargo, and passengers are lacking without adequate explanation, ships can be turned away from local ports. Of nearly 500 ships entering the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach monthly, as many as 50 to 60 are boarded and searched by the Coast Guard before docking.
A ship could be boarded with no notice. I mean, I could bring a boarding team right alongside and board them well before they get into the port, or I could provide them through some notification ahead of time that says I'm gonna board you, and that helps facilitate commerce a little bit when I do that. Or I'll say you're definitely not coming in at all, and prevent them from coming in, which would essentially be turning the vessel around or stopping them until all the questions are answered before we consider bringing them in.
Approximately 4 to 5 million cargo containers are imported through the LA Long Beach harbor annually. On a daily basis, the two ports count 11,000 container arrivals. All of the containers that leave the terminals by truck are scanned by one of the 85 portal radiation monitors. The Port of Oakland was the first seaport in the country to implement portal monitors in April of 2005. Installation of optical character readers at terminal gates was another development that allowed for technological tracking of trucks and containers. Recent actions by Congress, including the Security and Accountability for Every Port Act, should pump about $7 billion of new federal money into seaport security. Matching available funds to demonstrated need is critical. Previously, the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach together had received only a third of what had been requested. The prior $60 million received was not proportional on a federal level to the high volume of cargo passing through the local ports. Much of the new funding will be used nationwide for training, increased Customs and Border Protection inspection activities, Coast Guard and port security exercises, and new scanning technology.
People do realize that we have to be partners, that we all bring something vital and important to the table, and we have to leverage our resources. So I have found that we've had great cooperation and coordination with our partnerships, that people are not just looking, at lines of authority and bureaucratic walls that shouldn't exist. We've broken down those walls, and we are cooperating and coordinating.
A secure freight initiative developed by the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Energy has established an International Container Scanning Network, or ICSN. The ICSN has formed partnerships with foreign ports to install radiation detectors and imaging equipment at terminals around the world. Combined with an effort to upgrade the electronic manifest tracking process, containers will undergo intensive scrutiny before setting sail for the United States.
From the very first day of 9/11, our effort has been to figure out ways that we could understand what's inside that container before it's loaded into our ship. So this system of taking a X-ray picture of the contents of the container and taking a gamma ray vision also before the container is loaded, reviewing those pictures, matching the information that CBP has in other documents about various other risks that that container may have, will add significantly to the security of our system.
In late 2006, Governor Schwarzenegger signed an executive order creating the California Maritime Security Council. The council includes representatives of Homeland Security, the U.S. Coast Guard, the U.S. Navy, state agencies, and harbor businesses and labor unions. Action items for the council include identifying threats, improving security measures, coordinating information, and developing a statewide maritime security strategy. The Federal Bureau of Investigation has emphasized prevention of terrorism in the Los Angeles, Long Beach ports since 9/11. The FBI's Long Beach resident agency includes 16 full-time special agents who monitor and help coordinate law enforcement efforts in the Joint Terrorism Task Force. The local JTTF has responsibility for disrupting terrorist plots and relies on the coordination of federal and local agencies, including the Coast Guard and several area police forces. Additionally, the FBI joins with the Coast Guard as co-coordinators of the Area Maritime Security Committee.
Absent any current specific credible threat, we still believe that they're attempting to come. And so that requires a vigilance on our part, that we have to be careful that we've got everything in place to maintain that vigilance. So I do not know the answer to why the port has not been hit, why the LA port has not been hit, or why we have not received any significant incident here post 9/11. We keep telling everyone to be vigilant. Sometimes we don't know what that means, and we have a hard time defining vigilant. But it literally takes everybody in the community to be vigilant, and perhaps that's part of it. Perhaps that's part of it.
The majority of incidents that have been discovered by longshoremen, whether it be people that are smuggled into this port inside of a container, whether it be something dangerous leaking out of a container, whether it be something improperly loaded in a container. It's almost always, almost every single time, it's the longshore workforce that notifies someone, and they're the ones that discover this. And that's why sometimes it's hard to reconcile why authorities don't always look at the union and say, hey, this is my first line of defense. This is the logical people that we turn to. These are the guys on the docks. A lot of them, like myself, we've been here 20, 30 years, 33 years. These are the guys that know. Let's utilize them for their knowledge and their expertise.
Ultimately, everyone agrees that no security system is entirely foolproof. There are lingering questions about empty containers sitting in dockyards and the fact that export containers receive comparatively minor consideration and very little scrutiny. Other issues include the relatively low rate of visual cargo inspections, concerns about security of rail transportation through the harbor, and significant circumspection about the adequacy of information coordination in general. More federal funding is needed to secure the nation's front door in San Pedro Bay. Controlling access into the ports is another unresolved issue. In the final analysis, port security has to become everyone's responsibility. The eyes and ears of the thousands of employees who work in the terminals and harbor complex provide another layer of assessment, adding the human awareness element to the technological solutions. Preventing terrorism in seaports requires all of the resources that the goods movement industry can muster in cooperation with international, federal, state, and local authorities.